Hi, this is Catie Harris, the owner of Nursepreneurs, and this is a Nursepreneurs podcast episode. Today we have Kristin Zhivago on with us from Zhivago Partners digital marketing agency. Kristin, thanks so much for being here with us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
All right, well, why don't you start out and give us a little background about you? How did all of this start? Take us far back.
Oh, golly. I used to sell rocks in my neighborhood and along with little greeting cards and Girl Scout cookies and things. And I realized later that the old ladies bought the rocks not because I was a great salesperson, but because they felt sorry for me. I was, dragging around in my little red wagon kind of thing. But actually, my real career started after the usual high school jobs of waitressing and so on. When I was 17, I was working for a Pratt and Whitney distributor in San Diego area, and I think I was the first woman to sell machine shop tools in the United States. He gave me a catalog, and I was wearing a mini skirt, and I was a lot younger back then. And he said, you'll be fine. So I went selling in my 51 Chevy or whatever it was, and I didn't even make enough to pay for my gas. And of course, they told me I make $3,000 a month and all this. But what I learned the hard way was if you didn't know what you were selling, you couldn't sell. I went to one machine shop where this old guy came out and said, "Well, okay, honey, what are you selling?" And he said, "Tell me how your drill bit is better than the one I'm using now." And I didn't have an answer because they just gave me a catalog and I didn't know I needed to prepare. So in the parking lot after that very embarrassing moment, I decided I was going to learn everything about tech and selling, and I've been doing that ever since. So I ended up really immersing myself in technology. I ended up moving to Silicon Valley, spent about 12 years running an ad agency, PR house with my husband. We ended up, because he was a process freak engineer type of person, we ended up making as much as people with like 10 or 12 people, and it was just the two of us. So he really turned me into a process convert. Um, and that helped me because when the Macintosh came out, I went to my husband, who was our graphic designer, and said, "You know what? They're all going to go in-house, and I'm not going to fight it." So at the peak of our earning power, I shut down the agency and I called myself a revenue coach. I created an industry of one because I knew CEOs didn't care about sales and marketing, they cared about revenue. So I started helping companies market in house. And I did marketing and sales turnarounds for various CEOs. I did that for a number of decades, actually, all through the country. Worked for companies, tiny ones, up all the way up to IBM and Dow Jones and people like that. Um, I ended up working for hundreds of CEOs and interviewing thousands of customers and working with probably thousands of workers and employees. And it taught me a lot. And by the time 2017 rolled around, I realized that there were a lot of established companies who had good products and people, but they were having trouble with digital marketing. And since I knew a lot about it, I started an agency in 2017, and we've been going gangbusters ever since.
Wow, you said a lot there. So I'm going to go back to you with the catalog and the mini skirt and that conversation because I think that sounds like a true fork in the road. And being embarrassed like that is, it's horrible at the moment, but it is so life altering. And it sounds like that's what that was for you. I mean, prior to that, was that your first call, or you had been on calls previous to that and you
No,
just
I'd done a few other calls, but they were sort of routine. They didn't challenge me like this guy did. That guy changed my life. That old guy, he's dead now, I'm sure, but he really did because he was very nice about it. But he asked me the big question: just if you if you're here to sell, tell me why I should buy from you.
right?
I mean, and this is really the bottom line in marketing: is why should they buy from you? Why should they care? What are you doing for them, that makes them say, okay, I want this? And all of my work, interviewing customers, finding out what they really want, is basically what I teach people how to do,
Mhm.
is to find out what your customers really want from you, not what you think they want from you. Everybody guesses and they're afraid to interview their customers because they don't want them to spoil all their good plans. Their wonderful spreadsheets they've been staring at, at 3 in the morning, which is what entrepreneurs do. They fall in love with their spreadsheets and they kind of forget that the money comes from customers. They need to get that money from them. So it's the funniest thing. I mean, revenue comes from customers, and
Mhm.
yet marketers and entrepreneurs are so shy when it comes to just. I teach people, interview them after they've bought from you, and they're happy to talk to you, and they're not negotiating to buy. And I define that mindset as their desires, their concerns, and their questions. And if you keep those in mind and you say, okay, when they come to the website, they have to know immediately that you recognize what their desires are, not what you're guessing they are, not the marketing speak, but just exactly why they're there and what's the problem they're trying to solve. And then the second thing is there's no such thing as a virgin selling environment. So they have concerns. They've been burned before, they've tried other things and it didn't work out. So they have concerns. And if you address the concerns, that's the second hoop that you have to jump through. And the third one is, okay, now you've convinced me you know what I want. You've addressed my concerns. And now I have questions. I have very specific questions. And most of the salespeople are set up to answer the general questions. But the general questions now are all answered by websites and customer reviews and anything online. So by the time they talk to a salesperson, they have very specific questions, and you need to know what they are.
Mhm.
And if you do, and you address them, and again, this goes back to your website, which is your main selling tool. So desires, concerns, and questions, you get through those 3 hoops, and you've pretty much made the sale.
Yeah. Yeah. And we actually do talk about that a lot, that, the first time somebody talks to you, it shouldn't be like, oh, what do you do? Unless you're at a party or something, right? Like they should have some idea of who you are, and your marketing does all that. But one of the things that you had said was, that the clients, why should they work with you? And I think it's a really, really important point to hammer home, because, a lot of our nurses think that their biggest competition is, the competition down the street. And I'm like, no, the biggest competition is, status quo, what they're already doing. They're, nobody wants to change. Nobody wants to do something else. Nobody wants to add stuff to their life and pay for this, that, and the other thing. Your biggest hurdle is like what you talked about in that meeting with that man. Why you, like, what's important or what's special about you? And I don't think we focus enough on that, and especially interviewing. I mean, I try to hammer home interviewing, but everybody wants to do the latest funnel and not talk to the clients. So
And they want to build their persona with AI and all this stuff. They're sort of forgetting that human beings buy products and services, and they're more than happy to tell you exactly what they were thinking, what they were looking for, what they didn't see on your website, what they wish they had seen. They'll tell you all that stuff. You just have to ask them. You just set up a Zoom meeting audio, and I have a book out, Roadmap to Revenue, how to sell it the way your customers want to buy. And in that book, I give away all the secrets to getting them on the call and asking these open-ended questions.
mhm.
And they're good, solid thinking kinds of questions, and people like answering them. They don't mind spending half an hour or an hour. I even had a business partner for IBM miss a flight on purpose. She's halfway through, she turned to her assistant and said, cancel my flight, I'm not going, because she knew I had the ear of management and I was going to faithfully tell them what she said. It gave her an opportunity to speak to this 300,000 person company and tell them what she really wanted from them.
Yeah, that opportunity doesn't come often.
Oh, and people are kind of flattered. How often do you get somebody calling you and saying, and setting up an appointment, by the way, that's important. So you set up a time and they're just comfortable. Don't do video. It introduces the, do I have to dress up and start? And they should be able to just talk to you while they're catching a cab or whatever they're doing. So make it comfortable for them. Tell them up front it's anonymous. The way I'm reporting on this, I just say, here's what the answers are to this question. So the formatting of the reporting is important. Again, I spell all this out in the book.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because and especially in nursing, and I don't know if it's in other fields like this, but we get constantly harassed with like surveys and stuff. So we're all a little sensitive about interviewing and surveys and stuff, because one of the problems we have is that people, they keep giving us surveys, but they never change anything. So it's like, okay, are you happy now? No. Are you happy now? No. Are you happy now? No. How many surveys are you going to send me? So, you come into the business world and we say, go interview people, and it feels like go survey people. But I think you have to be really, really open-minded and let them say what they need to say without taking it personally.
Yeah, and knowing it's anonymous is important. And also, and I've kept that promise, even if a CEO says, oh, that's Bob, he always says that. I say, it doesn't matter if it's Bob or Harry or Sally. The point is that everybody said that. Okay. That's just one person saying that, but everybody said that. And by the way, you only have to interview about 5 to 7 people of a given type. That's the beauty of this method. To get bankable results. I've had companies, Siemens once hired me to talk to 40 people. I says, complete waste of your money. I don't want to do it. And they insisted. So by the 10th or 12th interview, it was getting really repetitive. So at the very end of the interview, I would say, well, I've heard from a few other people, and here are some of the additional things they said. Do you agree with this or not? So I did give them their money's worth. But honestly, if you talk to 5 to 7 and even 10 people of a given type, a certain type of patient or certain type of situation or whatever, and you ask these open-ended questions and let them talk, they will give you all kinds of information that just will make you say, oh man, we're talking about this, and what they care about is that. There's always a gap. Always. I have never gone to a company where there wasn't a gap between what the company, the owner, the entrepreneur, whatever, thought versus what people really were thinking when they set out to buy.
So are there like stereotypes, or, just the type kind of emerges as you're talking to people?
The types actually are when you're building the list. So as a business owner or as somebody who's freelancing, whatever your situation is, for example, if somebody's dealing with, well, in my case, have a lot of clients that sell high tech B2B types of business to business types of products. And they'll have a user, the financial buyer approver. So that's a CEO or somebody, and then maybe a purchasing agent. Those are 3 types. In the nursing thing, I think it would be more of the type of illness, like maybe, I'm just guessing here, but maybe, the people who are dying and, need the hospice care, or the intensive care people, or the burns, or, certain types of accidents. You guys know best. Your listeners know best what those categories are.
Okay. So I would say, especially for IV hydration or wellness, you're looking at the type of person that's looking for longevity medicine, or the type of person that is chronically sick all the time, or somebody.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just talking to a few of those people. All right. So when did you write Roadmap to Revenue?
I actually wrote it in 2011, but because I'd been in tech for so many decades, I knew I had to make it evergreen. I knew I wanted it to be a book that would be just as valid now as it was then. And I succeeded. I did an audio version a couple of years ago, and heard again after proofing my own book 18 times and having 5 other people proof it. I did hear again that, I knew that I had succeeded, that it really does apply, because we're talking about human nature. There are The only thing that's really changed since then is AI.
Mm.
AI is the biggest tsunami I have ever seen go through the tech industry. It's taken over everything. And so there are easier ways to find your answers with AI. But the reasons that people buy, how they buy, why they, depend on, do they depend on reviews or not? Did they look it up in Google, or did they think, oh, I'll never find it there? Where else did they go? Those things don't change that much.
Right.
So it's an evergreen book.
Okay. So it's more about strategy than just actual tactics. Like I'm going to do a Google ad or something like that.
No, I don't get into that. I really don't get into that much. I do focus on the 4 types of buying processes there are in the world, and that's still valid. When I was doing the book, I realized, actually my husband helped me realize that we're not talking about selling. We're talking about how people buy. And I was
Mhm.
one of the first people to even turn that on its head. And now a lot of people are talking about the buyer's journey and all of that. One thing I did, though, beyond that, is I classified the types of products and services in the world by the amount of scrutiny that the person applies to the purchase.
Hmm.
So there's light scrutiny, and I'll define these in a second. There's light, medium, heavy, and intense. This is how I've defined them. Light scrutiny is see it, buy it, impulse purchase, checkout counter, get the candy bar. You maybe have 2 questions like, can I afford this? Can my waistline afford this? And there's nobody else involved. You just see it and buy it. Medium scrutiny is you see it, you have a number of questions. This is like clothing in the B2C side, the business consumer side. In B2B, it might be a simple program type of thing, a simple software program. You see it, you ask maybe 20 questions, 10 or 20 questions. Maybe there's somebody else involved. Like clothing, maybe you're worried about what your spouse will think about what you got. And then you buy it. Heavy is when there's a salesperson involved, there's a contract involved. And this is for the consumer side, it's like cars and houses and that kind of thing. In the B2B side, it's more like ERP systems or CRM systems, the machinery, the software machinery that you use to run your business. In those cases, it's a long sales cycle, lots and lots of questions, definitely more people involved. And it's just anyway, so I've mapped out all those. Each chapter, I have a chapter devoted to each of these levels. And the things that you should do to promote them. So I do mention all of that stuff. And then intense is everything that was done in heavy with the salesperson contract and all that, but then you get married. And in the nursing procedure, I would think it'd be like long-term care, or in my case, as a revenue coach, I can have clients for 20 years and I just keep helping them grow their, it's a deep partnership between the buyer and the seller, and it becomes this ongoing thing.
Yeah.
How you sell those, I just need to finish sorry, how you sell those, it depends on that scrutiny level. So you don't need to have a newsletter on how to chew gum. And you shouldn't treat an intense or heavy scrutiny product or service like chewing gum. Like it's not a broad reach kind of thing. It's a much more targeted audience, and they want depth. They want real answers to all those questions. So I was trying to keep entrepreneurs and CEOs from making the most classic mistakes, which is thinking like a consumer product and it's just see it and buy it, when in fact it's this really heavy, intense kind of thing. So at least we get rid of those problems and mistakes.
Yeah, and that I think that's a really big distinction because like you said, the light features don't need massive funnels and all kinds of touch points. It's it's like your Instagram. Yeah, I can't tell you how much crap I balled off of Instagram on in a box
Yeah.
in the basement.
Yeah.
You don't have to think too hard about it. Do you think it's important to have a sampling of all the different amounts of scrutiny or sales types in a business, or is it just it depends on the business?
When I talk about light, medium, heavy, and intense to a large audience, people automatically know where their product falls on that. Now, I will say one thing has changed over the last, well, ever since Amazon came into business, which is that Amazon has done the best job of answering customers' questions. They really do. And they do it all different ways. You know, if the buying process were a house, they'd have like 17 doors into that house, and you could do whatever you wanted into a special room. Like, okay, what did other people say about it? What are the questions I have that other people could answer for me, other customers? So there's the reviews. There's what else might be the same thing in this category. Look at the manufacturer's site and see if there's something special. They've just come at that buying process from every single way. And what shocks me is how few people have caught up to that. I mean, Amazon is this perfect example, this big shining, light on the hill. And everybody goes, oh, I'll take one little candle's worth of that and put that on my site. But they're not understanding that they have figured out there's this buying process and we're going to support it at all these places. What's the other question they could ask? What could also help them?
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. Now you got me thinking about my own website.
Yeah, and even things like they're better at, you can even chat with people now on Amazon. It was a long time it took them to do that. I can understand why. It's a big project for them. But here's we've gotten your order. Now we're shipping your order. Now your order's delivered, and here's a picture of your order being delivered. All those concerns and desires and questions, they answer them all. And if Amazon's up here, the rest of the world is like way down, way down. Amazon's at 35,000 feet. The rest of us are running around at 1 foot. It's just amazing to me how few people have copied them. It's not cheap to
Right.
build that machine. So that would explain part of it.
I would ask, like, how would you apply kind of that Amazon model to a smaller business, let's say?
Well, if they understood the desires, concerns, and questions, they addressed them all properly, and it was easy to navigate, find yourself on their site. The top navigation is really important. You could be very Amazon-like. There was a guy several years ago who was doing a whole bunch of in-person webinars back in the day before there were a million not in-person webinars, but speeches. Like I was all over the world too, speaking, and now we all do webinars. But back then, he was a guy who made fiberglass pools, and he was competing against the cement guys. And he had more information on his site. He answered all kinds of questions about the difference between fiberglass and concrete, and why you have to watch for certain things, and what causes concrete to crack, and what do you have to be careful of when you install a fiberglass pool. What problems can you have? Things that none of his competitors were talking about. And people loved that guy because he was already telling them what they could expect. Here's the big question that nobody answers. What's going to happen to me after I buy? That's the big question. Nobody answers it. And if you do that, you say, okay, once you've signed up, then here's what we're going to do next, and here's how we're going to approach it, and here's the sign-in form, or whatever you're doing, where it just explain exactly what's going to happen to them. You'll be miles ahead of your competition doing that.
And I would say, from a selling standpoint, it seems like it would be obvious what the next, but when I'm buying, that kind of stuff, it's very uncomfortable. Like, well, what, okay, so then what? And you almost know logically what is, but then you don't. And it helps when people lay it out exactly step by step what is going to happen. It's a really, really good point. And I'm thinking as you're talking about this too, because like a lot of our nurses do have IV hydration or med spas, wellness centers and stuff. And I'm thinking about their websites. And we all take for granted that everybody knows what alpha lipoic acid and, the nicotinic, NAD does, methylene blue. And, we have these little blurps and the price and that's it. And you're like, okay, well, pick what drip out of 600 that are here that you want. And it's just kind of like, oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're blown away. And now, I mean, this makes it so obvious, like what needs to be done on a lot of these sites to just educate. And that's a big part of your marketing to start with.
I don't even think of selling as selling. I don't think we even need salespeople. I think what we need is, and I'm a recovering salesperson, so I have a empathy for salespeople, but nobody wants to be sold to. Nobody buys things to have a relationship with the seller. As I said in my book, nobody wants the car dealer showing up for dinner. Okay. It's just, that's not why we buy. We're not making friends. That was a dream of the seller. That whole relationship marketing was a dream of the seller, to get loyal customers, keep coming back and everything. But the truth is we're not buying to make friends. We're buying so that we can get the problem solved, address our desires and our concerns and our questions and all that, and move on with our lives. We've solved that problem. Now we can move on. But you brought up, this point keeps coming up in what you're talking about. The seller, the minute you start a business, you become a seller. And you live, eat, sleep, breathe, all of those different spa things or whatever it is that you specialize in. You've learned it all. The people coming to you are buyers. And if you put on your buying hat for a minute, you think, gee, what are the questions they would ask? And it's hard to do for your own business because you're not a buyer, you're a seller. So the whole purpose of everything I teach is how to think more like a buyer. What is it they care about? And again, if you don't ask them, you're guessing. And if you're guessing, you're losing. Period. End of story. It's the fastest way to go out of business is to forget who's buying it and what do they need. And just ask them. It's so simple. It's hard for people to do, but it's very simple.
Yeah.
So you just want to think like a seller. And you're right. If they had better explanations, if they had little diagrams, even if they sent them away to WebMD or something and let them look through there and come back. I mean, open a separate tab and keep your tab open. Those are all things that can be easily done, and people will appreciate you for educating them. There's no such thing as selling. Successful selling is educating.
Yeah. And that is something that the nurses do extremely well, is educate. It's their comfort zone. And, it's why I always said they make such great entrepreneurs. It's just that selling piece gets us all up in our heads.
Yep. Yeah, it's true.
Now we didn't even talk about Zhivago Partners. When did you start that?
2017.
2017.
Yeah, but I've had my own business for decades, but that was and reinventing myself into a revenue coach was one of the hardest things I ever did, because I went from a total process driven, everything was worked out. I knew what I was supposed to do every day. And for about 3 years, when I became a revenue coach, I didn't have a set thing that I knew I was going to be doing. And then I started doing these marketing and sales department turnarounds, and it got more obvious, and a lot of speeches and stuff. But I started this business in 2017, so it's been 7 years now.
Okay.
And we have a core team and a lot of specialists.
And what do you guys offer?
The whole digital marketing thing. I mean, websites, social, SEO, content marketing, online advertising. And I don't have employees. I have freelancers who are really good at what they do.
That's impressive.
They're smart individual entrepreneurial people who do exactly what they're supposed to. They're little business people, and they're totally dependable and they stay with me forever. I have one rule at our company. I don't work with jerks.
That's a good role.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that role.
Yeah. And I also don't have any jerk clients. So I have a little jerk test that I use when I'm interviewing people. And if they pass the jerk test, then they don't even know they're being tested. But I do that. And then we hire them, bring them on board. So we work in this jerk-free bubble all day. No jerk clients, no jerk workers. And by the way, I define a jerk as someone who makes life harder for everyone else. I don't care why, I don't care how, they just make it harder.
Yeah.
The good people, the nice people work on making things easier for everyone else.
Right. Exactly. That's a great definition. I love it. Now, does your agency work with small businesses or do you only work B2B?
We've been focusing on B2B lately. It's really where my roots are. I can and have and do consult to smaller businesses in the sense that maybe we don't end up being the agency, but I certainly do revenue coaching. I love doing revenue coaching, so much fun. We can do the research for them. And, sometimes there's a company that's small, they can't really afford us. We tend to be at the mid-sized company level. But I might do the research, the customer research for them, and come back with these reports that give you a word for word transcription of the conversation and then summarize it all and recommend what you should be doing. And so they get a playbook, they get something that says, okay, here's your strength and weakness, here's what you need to work on, here are the things that you're really good at and you need to push those in. And we can have monthly meetings or whatever. So I can work on that basis. And I like to stay active there because it just keeps me, with a bigger client, you kind of get in this thing where you know where you're going and it's a long-term thing, but the entrepreneurial things are pretty fun. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So you actually interview the clients for the business.
correct.
Oh, wow.
And they're much more open to hiring a third party. I do say in my book, you can interview them yourselves, but people tend to be a little bit polite when they're talking to the owner. They don't want to hurt your feelings. And so they might water it down when they're talking to me and they know it's going to be anonymous. And they know that I'm a consultant and I'm thinking, I'm really on their side. They'll just tell me the exact truth, what they would say to somebody else when you weren't in the room.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful. I love it. All right, Kristin. Well, this has been amazing. Like, what kind of advice would you give some of these small businesses that are working their way up, especially in the marketing? Where would be the best place for them to focus their energies after listening to this?
Interview your customers.
Yeah.
Get my book. It's not very expensive. Amazon raises the price every so often, but there's Kindle version, audio version, regular version. I do recommend that you buy the hard copy because when I lay out those buying processes, they're in charts, and the audio version doesn't do justice to those obvious charts when they're all laid out. The main thing is not to be afraid to ask your own customers, the people who've already bought from you, not the prospects, but the people who've already bought from you, these open-ended questions. I list them in the book. And then you actually know what you're supposed to do. Because part of what you'll be asking them is, how did you buy? Where did you go? Did they pay attention to online advertising? They pay attention to social? Did they see social? How did they find you? And you want to reverse engineer that successful process.
I love that. Yeah, I'm on Amazon right now. I'm going to buy the book.
That's fine.
Thank you so much, Kristin. Where can people find you if they have more questions or they want to learn more about you?
All you have to do is Google my name and you'll have page after page after page of me, whatever, speaking, writing, talking, teaching, Our website is zhivagopartners.com. The book's only on Amazon, and you just type in Roadmap to Revenue and it'll come up.
Yep, it comes up very quickly. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.